Released by Spike Chunsoft in the year 2012 on the PlayStation Portable, director Takayuki Sugawara and writer Kazutaka Kodaka worked together to create the sequel to the murder mystery visual novel of the same name. The game expands the events of the first game, revealing circumstances before and after, while maintaining mostly the same pace and format. For gameplay, while this uses an entirely new class and cast of characters, the daily life and deadly life aspects are mainly the exact same as the first game, with the addition of a few minigames and enhanced visuals for the exploration. The class trial segment has received a few adjustments to the same format, though there are a few new additions. Now, the truth bullets obtained can be used not only to shoot down arguments, but also reinforce suggestions made by other characters that the player agrees with. A new truth sword element is introduced for use during rebuttal showdowns, in which a clashing wordplay duel must be won by slashing at opponents' weak points. Finally, a logic dive has the player snowboarding down logical routes in order to arrive at a decisive conclusion. The story only gets larger from here, so let's cut it down to size with a recapitation. The game begins with a curious loading screen similar to an old-school PC game, and we are introduced to our new protagonist standing before Hope's Peak Academy, still the pinnacle of hope for society's future. Normally, the only way to get in is to be scouted by the school itself, in so much by being an ultimate at whatever you do, but our protagonist, the ordinary Hajime Hinata, admits his circumstances are a little different. During his recount of his first day at school, his memory is suddenly fuzzy, and he finds himself in a classroom with 15 other students, none of whom remember how they came to be here either. They are all soon introduced to a pink magical girl rabbit named Usami, who claims to be their new teacher and chaperone of their school trip. As it turns out, the classroom they're in is a prop in the middle of a scenic tropical island. To the startled students, Usami tries to calm them down and explain that this trip is to actually help everyone build hope in their hearts. In order to build bonds of friendship, they're actually assigned to relax, have fun, and generally enjoy themselves in this happy, heart-throbbing school trip on Dangan Island. Though Hajime doesn't remember what he's ultimate at, he meets the others: Nagito the Luckster, Hiyoko the traditional dancer, Akane the gymnast, Nekomaru the team manager, Mihiru the photographer, Fuyuhiko the yakuza, Mikam the nurse, Ibuki the musician, Kazuichi the mechanic, Gundam the animal breeder, Byakuya the affluent prodigy, Peko the swordmaster, Chiaki the gamer, Teruteru the cook, and Sonia the princess. As Usami gathers everyone by the beach, Byakuya theorizes this island is a real place in the Pacific called Jabberwock Island, given its distinctive geography, but something seems amiss. While hanging out at the beach and having fun, the sky suddenly darkens with unnatural clouds. Even Usami is confused as a silhouette of a bear suddenly appears on a nearby TV and invites them all to Jabberwock Park. As they gather before the giant statues of this island's mythical guardian beasts, the strange asymmetrical bear named Monokuma makes his entrance, once again proclaiming himself the headmaster of the school. He immediately expresses his displeasure at the boring lack of death and despair here, and Usami steps in to try and stop him. However, after the scuffle, Monokuma breaks Usami's magic stick, stripping her of her magical girl powers. As punishment, he then changes her appearance to a dual tone like his, declares her his little sister, and even changes her name to Monomi. Monomi still intends to oppose Monokuma, but the bear is still too strong for her. Now in control, Monokuma changes the rules of the game to a killing school trip, shocking everyone with news that if they want to leave this island, then they must kill someone else and make it through a class trial without getting caught. As before, after a trial examining the murder, the survivors vote on who they think is the blackened killer. If they are correct, then only the killer gets punished. Incorrect, then everyone but the killer gets punished. Naturally, everyone is in disbelief, and Monomi still stands to defy Monokuma. So, Monokuma not only unveils an array of giant robots called the Mono Beasts, but also uses one of them to make an example of Monomi. Deploying a massive minigun from the aerial Mono Beast, Monokuma has a gunned down Monomi in a rain of bullets, leaving nothing behind, much less any doubt that Monokuma is very serious about this arrangement. He leaves a horrified group behind, and Byakuya believes there must be someone controlling all these machines, as well as Monokuma. Not to mention, there is still the lingering suspicion of betrayal now amongst them all. They convene the next day to assess the situation, and Byakuya nominates himself leader of the group to ensure no one falls victim to the death game. However, they discover a mysterious bomb where the statue used to be, with a countdown clock. Incidentally, it also turns out Monomi is still alive, somehow, adding to their already growing list of mysteries. Monokuma gathers everyone to the park, with himself appearing all dressed up in order to do a two-man comedy show with Monomi. However, the real joke is on everyone, as he reveals Monomi is responsible for erasing all their memories of the years they spent at Hope's Peak Academy till this point when they arrived on the island. He proves this by knowing they all blacked out at the same time when they entered the academy. However, he says he can restore their memory if, of course, they commit a murder successfully. To spread further paranoia, he drops there is a mystery traitor among the students right now, and now with a motive they have a convenient excuse to kill someone. Both Monokuma and Monomi retreat before any questions can be asked, and the students are now left uneasy. The next morning, Byakuya unexpectedly declares the need to throw an all-night party in an enclosed space, though his reason for doing so seems unclear. In fact, when the party starts, Byakuya himself conducts body checks for security and confiscates anything that can be easily used as a weapon. The festivities begin and everything seems to be going well, but all of a sudden the lights are cut off and after the blackout, Byakuya himself is found stabbed underneath a table. Not long after the initial panic of the discovery, Monokuma appears to confirm one of the other students committed the murder and an investigation will commence immediately before a class trial. He leaves them a forensic file to get started, and they begin their investigation by looking at Mahiru's photos that she took at the party so far. After gathering all the clues they could find, Monokuma gathers them before a new spectacle, Monokuma Rock, where an escalator shoots out before them and takes them down to the class trial field. The trial for the first murder begins, and as they sort out this blackout murder where nearly everyone has an alibi, they find a rather clever execution. As it turns out, Byakuya received a letter threatening a murder that night, hence why he threw a party with everyone there and security set extra high. At the same time, someone plugged in just enough irons to almost overload the power usage of the cabin they were partying in, and set the air conditioner on a timer that would overload it at a precise time. When the lights went out, Byakuya happened to become prepared with night vision goggles, and witnessed Nagito when he was moving strangely in the dark to try and retrieve his hidden knife, as it was actually him who set all of this up to try and kill someone. At the same time, someone else who knew of Nagito's plan had also prepared an act of their own, under the same cover in the kitchen. Using a long iron skewer used in the prepared meat, a portable stove as a light source, and a spare tablecloth as cover, they moved under the cabin to where they knew Nagito would be. Meanwhile, Byakuya halted Nagito from getting to the knife, and in doing so took the skewer intended for Nagito and was killed in the act of trying to prevent a killing. The only person who could have half-baked such a culinary execution was Teruteru. Incidentally, while preparing food for the party, Teruteru saw Nagito prepare the murder while cleaning the party area prior, and actually confronted him about it. But Nagito explained openly that he wanted to start the killing, not because he wanted to leave the island, but in order to prove that hope will win against despair, so he'll gladly be the villain in order to make heroes of the Ultimates he so idolizes. Nagito admits this and reinforces that as a fanboy for Ultimate students, he feels he's unworthy of them all, and would rather die to make them look better than survive longer than any of them. Still, despite Teruteru's best intention and Byakuya's sacrifice, Nagito has an unhealthy obsession with finding an Ultimate Hope student, and sought to create a greater despair to uncover one. Granted, Teruteru wasn't wholly innocent either, as while he did want to save the others from Nagito the Madman, he actually wanted to use this as a way to get back home anyway. As his punishment execution, Teruteru is bound in chains, hit with a barrage of batter, and cooked alive as he is deep-fried in a sea of fire, much to the horror of everyone. The remaining 14 students are still shocked the next day, but Monomi comes with the good news she's defeated one of the giant Monobeasts guarding an island, but they are still unable to leave. Exploring the new island themselves, the group is still set to find not only a way to escape, but also unwind from the earlier tragedy. However, all they find is more clues to reveal that while the Jabberwock Island they're on matches the geography of the real Jabberwock Island, none of the architecture does, leading them to suspect this is all artificial, and surprisingly, Monokuma confirms this to a degree. Later, they find what seems to be a giant ruined yet modern building that says Future on its door, and stands as a mystery to even both stuffed animals. Instead, Monokuma talks about an organization called World Ender, whom is responsible for literally ending all current society, has a mole here hidden among the students, and is waiting to betray them all. The next day, Nekomaru and Kazuichi take the initiative to tie up Nagito, the suspected traitor, in case he tries to murder someone else in the name of Hope, and Monokuma presents a video game that he claims to be their new motive for murder anyway. Later, Hajime takes a look at the game, and while it seems a cryptic adventure game retelling a murder of a schoolgirl, it holds no influence to Hajime. The next day, as Mahiru seems strangely absent from the usual group breakfast, Kazuichi, who has a crush on Sonia, overhears she and the other girls were planning on hitting the beach, and asks Hajime to run wingman as he makes his move. As they wait for the girls to come by, they do indeed arrive in their swimsuits, with Akane having just fought Coach Nekomaru, and Peko arriving to say she was just swimming and couldn't find a nearby island to swim to for possible escape. Sonia finally arrives, and right when they're ready to go, they discover Mahiru dead in the beach house, killed in a manner eerily identical to how the girl died in the video game. As they investigate, even Nagito is let free to help, and they check out the game once more for its connection to the murder. While the murder and people within are based on true events, it's also during the school time that got wiped from their memories, so the girls that happen to share the same name as those in the game can't verify. Solving the murder mystery video game is the first step as it's revealed Fuyuhiko's sister was killed, and Mahiru helped cover up the identity of the true killer. As the class trial proceeds, it turns out Mahiru went to talk with Hiyoko about them being characters in the murder video game, and they agreed to meet later, and the killer overheard them, planning to use the meeting to stage a particular and specific murder. The killer forged letters to both recipients to meet at the beach house at 2 different times, so when Hiyoko arrived first, she was knocked out and put away to be framed later. Next, Mahiru was deliberately killed instantly by a similar metal bat as the same murder in the video game. The killer then used water bottles in the beach house to wash off and then hid. As Hiyoko woke up, she saw the body and fled, adding more suspicion to her, and the real killer used their bamboo sword to escape through the tall window and pretended to just meet up with the others. Despite the seeming lack of connection to the victim, the real killer was Peko. Before the final vote, Peko actually rushes them all to a vote, and after they vote for her, she reveals she was only a proxy for the real killer, Fuyuhiko, who really planned, prepared, and intended to kill Mahiro as revenge for her sister. She's actually Fuyuhiko's retainer as part of the same Yakuza clan, and suddenly the question of what defines the real killer comes out. Monokuma admits it's a gray area, but since Peko was the one to definitely do it, even though the motive and order came from Fuyuhiko, only she will get punished. For her execution, Monokuma controls Peko like the tool she was and pits her against an army of samurai. She's doing well, but Fuyuhiko rushes in to try and save her and accidentally gets slashed in the eye by her instead. She stops and comforts her master, as the army surrounds them and brutally stabs them both. Though Peko was certainly killed, Fuyuhiko is actually still barely alive, and Monokuma is forced to save his life, as per the rules, only the blackened is permitted to be executed. After the trial, Monami beseeches a mysterious audience to resolve the issue not only before the countdown on the bomb occurs, but also before more students die. She then defeats another monobeast and opens up the way to a new island for the students to explore. Within, they find a computer with a strange file on it, revealing even more about the calamity that happened to mankind. At first, there was a revolt within the school by the reserve department against the primary department, but by the hand of a powerful authority, social rioting began to spread across the world to an uncontrollable yet deliberate degree. Afterwards, survivors of the academy that caused this riot were even forced to kill each other as a lesson in despair. Hajime questions Monokuma about the reserve department as well as the surviving students, but gets no answers. Later, they find the hospital Fuyuhiko was sent to, and it turns out he survived his attacks after all. As they cheer up, Fuyuhiko returns with a new eye patch and a friendlier attitude, though Hiyoko isn't ready to forgive him for killing Mahiro and Peko. As part of his apology, he bows to them all and slits his own stomach, which convinces the others of his sincerity as he's carried again to the hospital. As they spend more time enjoying another party, they note Akane is missing, and as they look for her, they find her losing in a duel against Monokuma. As he prepares to kill her for insubordination with a bazooka, Nekomaru jumps in and takes the blast, saving Akane, and just barely surviving himself. Calling his sacrifice even, Monokuma agrees to save Nekomaru, but it's still a strong reminder of the situation they're in. The next day, Hajime notes Akane, Ibuki, and Nagito are all acting very strangely all of a sudden, and Mikan reveals they're all under some strange fever. Monokuma enthusiastically agrees and clarifies this fever is not only the new motive, but also something called the despair disease. As the name suggests, the victim experiences a fever and suffers under varying expressions of despair. For now, Nagito is now a constant liar, Akane is now a coward, and Ibuki is completely gullible. This personality-altering disease is also highly contagious, so now it's very likely the bonds of friendship they've been building will reverse in a murderous intent. Mikan takes them under her care in the hospital, and the rest of the group wonders how to handle this disease. Hiyoko pushes for complete quarantine for the three, as well as Mikan, who might get contaminated taking care of them. However, Fuyuhiko suspects this is actually a trap by Monokuma to separate the group and stir up paranoia. Hajime and Fuyuhiko volunteer to stay behind with Mikan and the affected, while the others intend to keep their distance at a nearby motel. The next morning, Hajime is energetically woken up, as Fuyuhiko shows Hajime a video chat device Kazuichi rigged up. Unfortunately, Monokuma forces all but Mikan to leave the hospital for the night, and as he dreams, Hajime recalls something about the past, suggesting he got into Hope's Peak Academy not through talent but by paying his way instead. The next day, he's roused and aroused awake by Mikan again, and as he checks their video chat device, he sees a creepy video of a person in hospital robes and a bag over their head ascend a stepladder into a noose. The video cuts off, and as Hajime hurries to the transmission source in the music venue, he sees Ibuki's hanging dead body. He hurries out to get help, but as soon as he returns, he is shocked to see Hiyoko's dead body has suddenly been added to the crime scene. As they investigate, it seems this is meant to imitate a theater movie Monokuma made that Hajime has not yet seen. Watching the murderer's parody of The Wizard of Oz, Hajime now sees the context for the murders as the class trial begins. He unravels this mystery, starting with the transmission he saw, and quite deliberately, as the killer wanted Hajime to think they were seeing a live hanging in the music venue, when it was actually them staging it in another room in the hospital. Truth is, Ibuki and Hiyoko were already dead, and the killer worked to lay red herrings towards making the scene look like a closed-room murder-suicide. The surgical precision of this murder was actually composed by the meek and mild Mikan. When confronted, Mikan falls into the embrace of despair, and Nagito reveals he noted Mikan caught the despair disease while she was caring for the infected, further reinforced by how feverish and daring she's been recently. Apparently, her symptom was remembering things, and as such, Mikan claims she did it for the sake of her beloved, but doesn't reveal who it is. She proves she remembers by revealing that the organization World Ender that did as its name says is also the organization called the Future Foundation, and that they brought them to this island as part of taking over the world. She also knows who the traitor among them is, but refuses to say. Right before her execution, she reminds them that regaining her memories allowed her to regain her personality, as the person she was before was only her past person, not her real current one, and that's actually true for all of them. As part of her punishment, she is launched into space atop a giant syringe-filled arm-shaped rocket. Conversely, Monokuma cheers them up by bringing back a restored Nekomaru, though unexpectedly, he's been brought back in a machine body. Meanwhile, as the strange device continues to count down, the surviving 9 students try to focus on their current mysteries adding up. Hajime seems the most likely to be the traitor, as he's always been the only one with no declared ultimate talent, but that's all been interrupted as Monomi comes in to reveal they have new access to another island. The students don't feel encouraged to explore as it may lead to another murder, but Monokuma sweetens the opportunity by saying they can find information on the Future Foundation, parts to make a boat, and even their student profiles from the school on that island. The island has an amusement park theme, and as Robo Nekomaru tests his new functions like dispensing soda, housing a clock, and having a sleep mode function, the group checks out the attractions and receive a file with the information on the Future Foundation. It details the events of the first game as well as the survivors, and they can't help but notice Byakuya is among them, as well as they all have no memory of this killing game occurring inside the school. As they investigate further, Monokuma gasses them all and brings them to a place called the Strawberry House, a section of the fun house wherein they are placed in a situation like the Hope's Peak killing game. They are all sealed in the fun house and can only get out when the killings begin again. Exploring their surroundings, they find a portrait of Hope's Peak Academy founder Izuru Kamakura, as well as an elevator to another section of the funhouse called the Grape House. Within, Monokuma drops the news that there is no food in these fruit-themed towers, so they should hurry up and kill someone before they all starve to death. They find a curious statue named Ogre and decide to go to sleep early to save energy. However, Monokuma won't let them rest, forcing them to participate in 7 AM Tai Chi and make them desperate enough to engage in another attraction here, the life-threatening death game, wherein he claims that weapon can be obtained. That night, Hajime believes he hears a loud crash, and the next day, Nekomaru is discovered thoroughly dead and dismantled. Despite being a cyborg, his murder is real, and a class trial ensues after a weary investigation. After playing the life-threatening death game in order to see what happened, Nagito wins the Russian roulette and wins the student profiles of everyone during their time at the academy. It also details information about the previous killing game, and Nagito notes that the sequence of murders this time is strangely identical to the file. The first murder was an unexpected person in an unexpected place, the second revealed a serial killer mark, and the third was a double killing. With Monokuma driving the motives very specifically this time, it's strange since that would suggest his fourth murder would be ruled as suicide like before. Furthermore, he reveals Hajime was actually not ever an ultimate student, but in fact a reserve student from the reserve department. It turns out there are 2 tiers of students at Hope's Peak Academy, in which the primary course is for the custom-picked ultimates, and the reserve course for reserve students who paid an exorbitant tuition and passed an entrance exam. Basically, the reserve students were used as stepladders to support the advancement of ultimate students, and in return got to claim the prestige of attending the school. Nagito immediately changes his tone to a more dismissive and condescending one, not only to Hajime but to everyone else as well. The trial room erupts from below the room, and during the trial, Nagito reveals the ultimate weapon is knowledge of the funhouse's tricky building structure, which plays into the way the murder occurred. First, the murder sabotaged the elevator, cutting off access between the Strawberry and Grape houses, and turned back all the clock to back 2 hours in order to fool everyone except for Nekomaru, who had an internal clock. Having already obtained the proper tools from the Funhouse death game, they were ready, and with everyone except for Nekomaru displaced by 2 hours, they knew where Nekomaru would be in the Tai Chi room at 7 AM. There, the killer used hamsters to activate Nekomaru's sleep mode and tied him up, and placed the weapons in such a way to prevent the others from learning the tricky architecture of the Funhouse, in which the 2 houses are actually atop each other as a 6-story building, rather than 2 adjacent 3-story buildings. When Nekomaru woke from his sleep mode, he struggled against his bonds but fell 4 stories onto a pillar below, decapitating himself and dying instantly. This tricky, overly complicated murder in the Trick House was performed by none other than the overtly complicated Gundam. Gundam plays off the verdict, and it's suspected he's actually sacrificing himself for their sake, as he faces an execution of being gored by a wild stampede, but not before ensuring the safety of his animal friends. Meanwhile, Nagito reflects to himself the information gained from winning the Funhouse death game, and how no one saw through his lie. He approaches Monokuma with the offer to help root out the traitor, and help with despair in an attempt to give everyone hope and become the ultimate hope himself. He actually deduces Monokuma not only knows who the traitor is, but he's also waiting for someone in order to make things more interesting. As the remaining 7 students convene the next day, Monomi defeats the last Monobeast, and Hajime confesses his secret of being a reserve student, though everyone seems to not mind and still consider him a trusted friend. On the final island, the setting seems to be a future metropolis, and within they find a literal Monokuma factory manufacturing Monokuma plushies and other merchandise. They also see a military base and find a book detailing Future Foundation's plans to turn this island into their home base. Later, they find a research lab for Sea King Industries, where the Monobeasts are being created, as well as a new strange robot. As they regroup, Nagito is obsessed with becoming the ultimate hope, and declares there is no need for another motive as he'll root out the traitor with the info he has, even if it costs him his life. The next day, Kazuichi enables a plan to tie up Nagito again, but the situation reverses as Nagito set up multiple bombs around the island, and declares an intention to save everyone by blowing up Jabberwock Island. He adds that the bombs will all go off in 2 days if the traitor does not reveal themselves. The next day, the remaining students opt to search for the bombs hidden around the island, and within the large castle in the theme park island they find a clue to the password to the Future Foundation building ruins, but make no progress to the bombs. The next day, Akane loses patience and attempts to strangle the answers out of Nagito, but fortunately Chiaki stops her before she kills him. Nagito leaves clues as to where he hid the bombs, and they opt to split up and search each island separately. They find the explosives in the Monokuma plushie factory, but it's rigged with no conceivable way to quickly disarm it. A nearby laptop taunts that only the keycard of the traitor he discovered will disarm it. As a rash move, Chiaki tries her ID, but nothing happens, and Sonya learns during her search that it's not bombs but fireworks in the truck. The fireworks go off, and Nagito taunts them again for believing his trick. He invites them to the warehouse next door, where he wants them to share who the traitor is if they outed themselves. Breaking down the jammed door, they are greeted by strange music and suddenly combustion of the warehouse. After throwing some nearby flame-retarding grenades that are strangely ineffective, the sprinklers turn on, and after the smoke clears, they see an area sectioned off to the warehouse, wherein they are all shocked to find Nagito, bound, stabbed, gagged, stretched, and impaled. The need for a class trial afterwards means one of them actually committed the brutal murder, and as they investigate, Hajime finds a journal by Monomi and an unusually thick file in Nagito's room, which was the student profiles Nagito won earlier. They discover of the 16 students, they note Byakuyo's file isn't actually there. Rather, there is a file covering for an unknown new student titled the Ultimate Imposter, proving the one they thought was Byakuyo here was a fake pretending to be the Byakuyo who survived the previous school killing game. Incidentally, this then models again the first set of trials, in which the first person killed was a case of mistaken identity. Before the trial begins, the students are reminded this will be the last trial per Monokuma, and Monomi warns he's planning something worse after the trial. As they break down this bizarre setup, they gradually come to the conclusion Nagito set up his own death in such a manner they have no way of solving it through logic like they have been, and have to rely solely on luck. Namely, Nagito saved the killer poison he also won in the Funhouse Death game, and with gear from the military base, he filled one of the fire grenades with the poison. He then sent everyone away with his bomb threat while he set up an elaborate self-execution, starting with self-mutilation. The fire was rigged to start when the others burst into the warehouse, and the tainted grenade set up to be used so once thrown the poison would evaporate and Nagito would die, forcing the spear he held in place to fall and impale him. All this would make it look like someone killed him deliberately, when it really made one of them an incidental killer by random chance. Because the real killer was unaware of the trap and there's no way for them to solve for it, Nagito's trap ensnares them all. Chiaki points out Nagito may not have wanted the killer to be left to chance as it appears, as he was always adamant about outing the traitor despite the deep despair, and actually used his ultimate lucky talent to have the traitor somehow be the one to throw the poison even though it seemed completely random. Even more, to have the group guess, Nagito also believed in his luck that the real traitor would be revealed. Chiaki begins to speak strangely about not being allowed to think or act out in line as a traitor, and compels Hajime to point reluctantly at her. In addition, Monomi's journal is not actually her own, but rather one written and sent to her as a report, as proven by a note within that only Chiaki and Hajime himself would know. Urging everyone to vote for her, the group dishearteningly votes Chiaki as the killer, and it turns out to be true, even if by the long odds of the ultimate lucky student. As a result, Monomi volunteers to be killed with Chiaki, the ultimate gamer. For their execution, Monokuma sets up an elaborate game of Space Invaders with the real tank, though Chiaki sees a way out. Running towards a supposed secret escape, she instead finds herself trapped in a closed room set up like a Tetris game where she is crushed by a high score. Despite the unpopular conclusion to the last trial, as it resembled the first wave of trials in which it was more a witch hunt killing than a murder trial, Monokuma declares no more obstacles in the end of the killing school trip. However, Hajime catches that there are still 2 days left on the giant Monokuma bomb in the park, yet he seems strangely fine with allowing the specifically 5 of them to leave early. The next day, Hajime wakes up, but suddenly everything seems bizarrely disoriented. Outside, Hajime runs into Chiaki as if nothing is wrong, and they chat about the leftover message left by Nagito, with Gundam randomly there. Apparently, he wanted to kill everyone except for the traitor, though Byakuya urges them to listen more. Nagito reveals more, including his same rhetoric about wanting to be the ultimate hope, but reality itself seemed to be crumbling and jarbling on itself. With a password in hand, everyone, literally everyone, goes inside, and Hajime becomes self-aware there is something very wrong with the world. Meanwhile, the Monokuma bomb detonates, destroying certainly everything, but possibly nothing. As time rewinds to inside of a boat, Nagito is seen talking to someone who reveals they have something left behind by the ultimate despair, to do something about the mundane masses who bend the world instead of those with real talent. Nagito also reveals that despite his hatred of the ultimate despair, he has had his own hand replaced by her severed one as a means of claiming her power, though he finds himself questioning his hate of her as they approach Jabberwock Island. Back with Hajime, he finds himself in a classroom and later the gymnasium of Hope's Peak Academy, wherein Monokuma tells him to research the outside world and to decide whether to stay on the island or leave for the outside world. Monokuma leaves him a manga retelling the history of the academy, which delves deeper and reveals that the recruiters of the school are also its educators and researchers, as the school is also a researching center for talent. However, researching is expensive, and so to supplement their funds they created the reserve department, wherein normal students can pass an entrance exam for entry and be taught by normal teachers. However, in exchange for the status of going to the school, the reserve students would have to pay very high fees in tuition. Still, despite the thin veil that the reserve department was only made to collect money, it became very popular. However, the goal of all the research was to create a true genius who would become mankind's greatest hope. Unfortunately, an unexpected tragedy crippled the school and forced it to shut down. In another manga volume, the central figure to the tragedy was a student named Izuru Kamakura. He was the genius and the symbol of hope delivered by the Academy's research program, and was a genius possessing many talents. Armed with superior talents, he was referred to as the ultimate hope. To protect their investment, the Academy erased Izuru's past and identity, so even most students in the Academy didn't know of him. However, he was responsible for starting the Great Tragedy, in which he brutally murdered the 13 members of the Student Council, the leaders of the already great talent in the school. Not only that, the school actually covered for Izuru and pretended the incident never happened. However, another student investigated and brought to public knowledge the murder and cover-up, and stirred up a riot within the already exploited reserve students. This incident would then escalate worldwide into the biggest, most awful, most tragic event in human history, as detailed in the actual side story to the game, Danganronpa 0. And yet another manga volume covering the global tragedy, and continues that the social riot in the school spread to the internet and other countries and cultures, and prejudices were taken to violent extremes. A mentality of despair grew throughout the world, and eventually people were simply warring for war's sake. Granted, this movement was facilitated by a large and powerful group devoted to the student that started this tragedy, a group called the Ultimate Despair. The group then used their own and others' talent to create and influence even more despair. Later, Monokuma explains that while there was a group called Ultimate Despair, they are named after the title of the high school girl with the same talent, Junko Enoshima, aka the Ultimate Despair. Junko recruited everyone in the group and used their own positive and negative biases against them to create despair and an obsession with her. She manipulated people in such subtle yet direct ways that, for example, by changing their motivations, she compelled the 2,357 students of the reserve department to voluntarily commit mass suicide. Only one reserve student remained, Hajime himself. Fuyuhiko adds that in another manga volume, it recaps the killing school game and events of the first game, ending with 6 students surviving and Junko dying. Later, they learn those same students formed up with others to create the Future Foundation, and that Jabberwock Island has become the site of a Neo-World program involving 15 more found students of the Academy. Later, they find a list of all of their names as test subjects on it, but also a newspaper with Hyogo's picture on it, but she's much older and mature than the impish child they knew. In addition, they find yet another portrait of the Academy's founder, Izuru Kamakura, yet this seems contradictory to the information they already gathered. And in another room, they learn of the Hulk Cultivation Project, the name given to the effort made by the Academy to create what they viewed as the one true hope, and a report saying the 15 captured students were to be left in the care of the survivors of the killing school life. A later report addressed to Makoto Naegi expresses concern in his act to keep the captured remnants of despair alive, as opposed to terminating them. In another room, they find a tablet detailing the Neo-World program, which is a psychotherapy program meant to place its subjects in an artificial virtual world and replace memories with synthetic ones for the purposes of undoing trauma, reversing brainwashing, and rehabilitating the subject. Later, Hajime encounters the AI Alter Ego, which currently administrates the Neo World program, who informs him a virus has affected it and caused all sorts of peculiarities, such as this very school. It confirms Monomi and Chiaki were created virtually to assist the other 15 students like Hajime in order to help them recover, but someone on the outside uploaded a virus to turn their world into a killing one. Monokuma interrupts before more can be revealed, but as the world begins bugging out, a new silhouette brings Hajime out to inform him help is there and will arrive during the perverted graduation exam Monokuma has prepared. And they will be bringing a forced shutdown sequence that so far has been blocked by the virus and the necessity of needing 8 people present. As the world resumes, Monokuma brings him to a final trial spot where he begins stalling for time until some people he's waiting for arrive. In the meanwhile, he reveals that this whole world is virtual, hence all the absurdly over-the-top and inconsistent details on the island. All of them are actually in pods in the real world, with their minds being synchronized to a computer program, and they themselves are just avatars made from their memories from before the academy. At first, they are reluctant to believe this, but when considering the evidence they find of their real bodies being much older, it makes sense their minds constructed these high school bodies. Unfortunately, despite this being a virtual world, those that have been killed, their minds, with this hyper-reality, would likely have stopped functioning too, with their bodies technically being alive but brain-dead. Next, the guest Monokuma was awaiting for arrives, and is none other than Makoto from the original game, who appears and informs them all that before he rescues them, he needs them to accept some truth. Firstly, the Neo World program, also called the Hope Restoration program, was meant to rehabilitate them, the 15 rescued students from Hope's Peak that were formerly the remnants of despair. They were of the group Ultimate Despair that killed their friends and family, committed self-torture, and ushered in the end of society and order worldwide. In fact, when Nagito learned the truth as his prize for the death game, it's why he tried to kill all of them in the name of hope. However, in a latent vision, Hajime recalls Nagito even once severed his own arm and attached the late Junko's arm in hopes of keeping her alive within himself. The Ultimate Despair were so twisted and obsessed with Junko, they sacrificed their families for her experiments, enabled mass suicides after she died, implanted parts of her into themselves, and engaged in necrophilia with her corpse. Makoto urges them to choose graduation so their avatar persona will be uploaded to their real body, thus overriding their past despair selves. However, something seems off as Monokuma and Makoto both seem to want the same thing. Hajime catches that this Makoto is actually a fake, and in response, Monokuma powers up and unveils a giant virtual Junko. She explains that while she's really dead, she adapted the alter ego AI and her own version while she was still alive. Someone infiltrated Future Foundation and uploaded her to this program, wherein she began modifying the graduation program to where they can not only return to the real world, but those that died can come back as well. Despite the lack of reason to trust her, the group almost presses graduate, when just in time, the real Makoto interrupts to expose her lie. In truth, Junko was working to modify the graduation system in which her avatar and mind would be uploaded to everyone's mind who died in the program. Eventually, she intends to clone herself to every mind across the world to create an ultimate despair utopia. Fortunately, Makoto had a hidden command in this program that can shut down the world and stop Junko totally, but they need at least 8 people versus the 6 they have now. Just then, virtual avatars of Kyoko and Byakuya appear to lend their aid to Makoto, though it comes out that the shutdown deletes all avatars within, including all of them, meaning that they would wake up as their original despair selves with no overwriting. However, Junko is confident the students won't agree to the shutdown and go back to despairs, so she believes she's effectively trapped them all here. As a final trump card, she calls upon Izuru Kamakura, the original Ultimate Hope, starter of the original Great Tragedy, and also Hajime's true identity. As it turns out, part of the Academy was researching the talents of Ultimates in order to create the ultimate true hope for humanity in the Hope Cultivation Project, also called the Izuru Kamakura Project in honor of the Academy's founder. Hajime was the reserve student used as a lab rat in their project to manufacture an artificial ultimate, resulting in a transformational operation that granted him the speciality of talent itself. Later, Junko would break his spirit to turn him into an ultimate despair, and he not only has another flash to what he really looked like, but also the realization that he was the saboteur that uploaded the Junko virus AI into the system in the first place. Hajime cannot find himself choosing a clear option, as every choice before him has a bad outcome for a main party. If he chooses graduate, then their avatars will live, but the Future Foundation will be stuck and Junko will escape. Repeating means no one leaves forever, and the shutdown means Junko will be stopped and the Future Foundation lives, but Hajime and the other avatars will all be erased. Junko takes the initiative and resets the game, and Hajime finds himself floating in a subspace, consulting Chiaki, who turns out was just an NPC like Monomi that only existed within the game, and she encourages him to believe in himself and create a new choice. Confronting his own nihilistic presence and the despairing choice laid before him, Hajime chooses to create his own future and break out of his own mental prison. Erupting with the awakened ultimate talent and confidence in the future, Hajime breaks the others out of a deadlock of hope and despair, and definitively cuts down the series of bad choices laid before them. With the students bouncing back with their belief of control of their own lives, they press both the graduate and repeat buttons at the same time while also triggering the shutdown. Suddenly, Usami comes back and single-handedly uses her magical girl powers to defeat the giant viral AI Junko, both programs ending once and for all. As the game concludes, the original students are impressed at the unexpected solution Hajime presented, and all the students finally leave the simulation and killing school trip. Back in the real world, Hajime and the others opt to stay in the Future Foundation on the real Jabberwock Island and find a way to help their sleeping friends, while Makoto and the others see this as a sign those students succeeded in not reverting to the remnants of despair with the future that they made. With the great tragedy still a reality for the rest of the world, the agents turn to create their own future too. Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair has enjoyed the success of selling over 300,000 copies worldwide. A big thanks goes out to Chris for his donation. Thanks a lot for helping make this possible.